He said he sold insurance. Boring. Predictable. Home by 6 every night. Grace believed him for 2 years. Jason Reed kept his desk clean and his voice quiet. He laughed at the right jokes in the break room. He brought coffee exactly the way she liked it. No reminder needed, the same paper cup from the same card on the same corner every single morning. Nobody in that office building had ever heard him raise his voice. Nobody had ever seen him rush. He was the guy who double-checked the fire exits during the safety briefing and made everyone laugh doing it. The guy who remembered birthdays. The guy Grace's mother said reminded her of Grace's late father. Steady, unremarkable, safe. Midtown Manhattan hummed the way it always did at rush hour. Horns, steam curling up from a grate, the smell of a hot dog cart drifting through the revolving doors 31 floors below. Tonight, at 6:47 p.m., the fire alarm went off on the 31st floor, and Jason didn't reach for his jacket. He reached for his phone, looked at a message no one else could see, and went very, very still. "Jason," Grace said. "That's not a drill face." He didn't answer. He just started walking, fast, calm, toward the stairwell instead of the elevator bank, against the tide of people heading for the lobby. Grace had known him long enough to know his walk. This wasn't it. She followed him. If this kind of quiet storm story is your thing, go ahead and drop a comment right now telling me where you're tuning in from. Hit that subscribe button and give this a like before we go any further. It really does help. Now let's find out what Grace saw in that stairwell. The stairwell smelled like cold concrete and dust from an HVAC vent nobody had cleaned in years, the kind of smell that never reached the polished lobby downstairs. A single fluorescent tube buzzed somewhere above them, flickering on a half-second delay. Grace's heels echoed too loud against the steel steps, and she slowed them on purpose, pressing her palm flat against the cool handrail to steady herself 2 flights below him. Jason moved differently in there. Lighter on his feet, quieter. He took the stairs the way a man takes stairs he's counted before, in the dark, more than once. She'd seen him limp once, months ago, favoring his left knee after a pickup basketball game he never actually named a location for. She'd let it go. People had old injuries. People had things they didn't explain, and you didn't push, not if you loved them. She thought about that limp now, watching him take the stairs 2 at a time, without a hint of it. At the landing between the 29th and 28th floors, he stopped, pressed 2 fingers to his ear like he was adjusting an earbud she'd never noticed he wore. "Ferryman, radio check," he said low, flat, almost bored. Grace froze against the wall, half a flight up, breath caught somewhere behind her ribs. Ferryman wasn't a name she knew. It wasn't a nickname from college or a fantasy football league or anything he'd ever mentioned in 2 years of Sunday mornings and shared toothpaste. Someone answered him through the earpiece. She couldn't hear the words, only the change in his shoulders when he did. The way they dropped, went loose, went ready. She had never once seen Jason Reed look ready for anything. She didn't call his name. Some instinct, older than 2 years of Sunday mornings, told her not to make a sound at all. 2 years back, on their 3rd date, over cheap wine at a place on 9th Avenue, Jason had told her he majored in economics at a state school in Ohio, worked 2 years in Chicago underwriting, then transferred to the New York office for a change of scenery. It was a good story, detailed enough to feel true, boring enough that no one would ever bother poking at it. Grace had never once had a reason to check it. Why would she? People didn't lie about being boring. Now, watching him press his back against the stairwell wall the way you'd brace for a door to swing open hard, she started running the math on things she'd filed away without meaning to. The way he always sat facing the restaurant door. The way he flinched, just once, the first 4th of July they spent together, when a kid 3 tables over popped a party popper 2 close to his ear, flinched, then smiled, then ordered another beer like nothing happened. The 3-inch scar along his ribs, he said, was from a bike accident in college. She'd traced it with her thumb 100 times and never once thought to ask why a bike accident would leave a scar that clean, that straight. Below her, Jason eased open the door to the 28th floor a few inches, checked the gap, and spoke into his sleeve again. "Copy. I'm 3 minutes out. Confirm the west stairwell is still clear." 3 minutes out from what? Grace's phone buzzed once in her pocket. A push alert. NYPD advisory. Shelter in Place, Midtown. She didn't open it. She couldn't stop looking at the back of his head. The same head that fell asleep on her shoulder during boring movies, that she'd kissed goodnight 400 times without once wondering what was actually behind it. The door clicked shut below her. His footsteps didn't slow, didn't hesitate, didn't sound like a man who'd ever once in his life been unsure of a floor plan. Dave Foster had worked building security for 11 years, wore his uniform pressed, even on double shifts, and hated exactly one thing about the job: people who thought a fire drill was optional. He'd seen every excuse. The guy who claimed his shoes weren't evacuation shoes. The woman who insisted on finishing her lunch first. He wasn't in the mood for another one tonight. Sir. He caught Jason by the 28th floor exit, one hand up like a crossing guard, radio crackling on his hip. Everyone goes to the lobby. That's the drill. That's always the drill. This isn't a drill, Dave. Jason's voice was calm, almost gentle. I need you to get everyone off this floor and down, and I need you to not go toward the west corridor. Dave laughed, short and disbelieving. You sell insurance, man. Sit down, Job. Go to the lobby with everybody else. Behind them both, Grace stood frozen in the stairwell doorway, unseen, listening to her boyfriend of 2 years get told by a security guard exactly what she believed about him an hour ago. Jason didn't argue. He didn't puff up or pull rank. He simply reached into his jacket, showed Dave something small and laminated that Grace couldn't see from her angle, and said 4 words too quiet to carry. Dave's face changed instantly, from irritation to something closer to fear. Copy that, Dave said, and his voice had lost its confidence completely. West corridor's yours. Grace's chest went tight. Whatever Jason had just shown him wasn't insurance ID. Somewhere below them, 3 floors down, a device the size of a laptop sat wired into a server closet nobody had checked in months, and the timer on it had just crossed under 4 minutes. Grace didn't know that yet. She only knew the number 4, whispered once, and the way Jason's shoulders had gone from calm to something colder. Ferryman, this is Overlook. The voice in Jason's ear was female, clipped, all business. We have eyes on the server room via the building's internal camera feed. Device is a fabricated IED, likely ammonium nitrate-based, wired to the fire suppression override. If it detonates, sprinklers fail across 6 floors. Copy, Overlook. Jason moved down the stairwell fast now, no longer bothering to hide his pace. Time on the clock? 3 minutes 40. NYPD bomb squad is 9 minutes out. You're the only asset inside the perimeter. Grace followed at a distance, close enough to hear fragments, far enough that he hadn't noticed her yet, or was choosing not to. Her hands had started shaking somewhere around the 27th floor. His hadn't shaken once. Ferryman wasn't a name. It was a call sign, and somehow that word terrified her more than anything else she'd heard all night. It meant this wasn't the first time. It meant there was a version of him that existed long before she ever poured him a cup of coffee at 7 a.m. At the 25th floor landing, Jason finally stopped, turned, and saw her. For one full second, neither of them said anything. His face didn't do what she expected. No panique. No scramble to lie. Just a flicker of something that looked almost like grief. Grace. His voice was steady, but his eyes weren't. You need to go back up. Now. I will explain everything, I promise you that, but not tonight, not like this. Jason, what is happening? There's a bomb 3 floors below us, he said flat and fast. And I'm the only person in this building who can stop it. Grace's mouth opened, and nothing came out. Somewhere behind his eyes, the man she thought she knew and the man standing in front of her were finally, unmistakably, the same person, and she had no idea which one to be afraid for. I'm not leaving, Grace said, and her voice surprised her by not shaking. Grace! 2 years, Jason. 2 years of Sunday pancakes and your mother's Christmas cards, and you don't get to send me upstairs like I'm a stranger you're protecting from a car crash. Something in his jaw tightened, the same tell she'd never once questioned before tonight, the one she'd assumed just meant he was tired from work. Fine, he said. Stay behind, Dave. Do exactly what he says. That's the deal, or I carry you up myself. Dave Foster, still pale, still recalculating everything he thought he knew about the quiet insurance guy from 31, nodded fast. Copy that. Ma'am, with me. Jason was already moving again, taking the last flight to the 25th floor 2 steps at a time, earpiece live. Overlook, Ferryman. I'm at 25, proceeding to the server closet on 22. Confirm nobody's inside the perimeter I don't know about. Negative on additional hostiles inside the building. But Ferryman, Thermal picked up a second heat signature on the loading dock 40 seconds ago. Could be nothing. Could be your extraction problem. Copy. I'll deal with the room first. Grace watched him disappear through the stairwell door below, and for one strange second, she wasn't afraid for him at all. She was afraid of how calm she suddenly felt, watching a stranger wearing her boyfriend's face walk toward a bomb like it was Tuesday. Dave shifted beside her, radio hissing static. Ma'am, for what it's worth, I've worked this building 11 years. Never seen anything like whatever that man just showed me. Not once. Grace didn't answer him. She was too busy counting backward through every ordinary Tuesday she'd ever spent with a man who apparently had never had an ordinary Tuesday in his life. The 22nd floor was dark except for the emergency strip lighting along the baseboards, casting everything in a dim red-orange glow. Jason moved through the empty cubicles low and fast, past abandoned coffee mugs and a half-eaten sandwich someone had dropped mid-bite when the alarm sounded. The air smelled faintly of scorched dust from an overworked server rack somewhere close. Overlook, I'm inside. Heading to the server closet, northeast corner. Copy. Camera 3 just went dark. Could be a glitch. Could be someone cutting your visibility on purpose. Jason slowed at the corner, back against the cubicle wall, listening. Somewhere ahead, a door hinge creaked. A man stepped out from the server closet doorway. Mid-30s, work boots, a tactical vest under a maintenance jacket that didn't match the building's actual maintenance uniforms. He froze when he saw Jason, hand already moving toward his hip. Jason didn't wait for him to finish the motion. It happened in under 2 seconds, a controlled step inside the man's reach, a strike to the wrist that sent a handgun skittering across the carpet, a sweep that put the man flat on his back with Jason's knee against his sternum before he'd even fully registered what happened. Who else is in the building? Jason said, quiet, almost conversational, like he was asking about the weather. The man on the floor said nothing, jaw clenched, eyes furious. Overlook, I've got one hostile secured. There's at least one more. Confirm loading dock signature. Confirmed. Moving toward the parking garage. You need to choose Ferryman, the bomb, or the runner. Jason looked down at the man pinned beneath his knee, then at the closet door behind him, red digital numbers ticking down somewhere inside it that he couldn't yet see. 2 minutes, maybe less. The bomb, he said. Always the bomb. The server closet was barely 6 feet by 8, humming with the low mechanical drone of cooling fans that hadn't been serviced in a while, the air 10 degrees warmer than the hallway, and thick with the smell of hot plastic. Wedged between 2 server racks sat a gray plastic case, lid open, wires running from it into the building's fire suppression control panel. Jason crouched in front of it, breathing slow and even, and started narrating out loud for Overlook's benefit. I've got a timer, LED display, reading 158 and counting. 2 wire bundles, one red, one black, both running into what looks like a modified relay board. This isn't amateur work. Someone knew this building's suppression system architecture, down to the panel model number. Copy. Bomb squad is 6 minutes out. You don't have 6 minutes. Talk me through the relay. Standard override circuit, but there's a secondary trigger soldered in. Looks like a tilt switch. If I move the case wrong, it goes early. Grace's voice crackled faintly through Dave's radio 1 floor up, tight and pleading with the officer who'd finally reached them. There's someone down there, my boyfriend. He works for... She stopped herself, realizing she didn't actually know what to call him. Not accurately. Not anymore. The officer just frowned at his radio. Ma'am, dispatch has no record of any authorized personnel inside that perimeter. No record. Grace repeated it silently. Of course there wasn't a record. That was probably the entire point of him. Below them, in a room the size of a closet, Jason Reed, reached toward a wire with steady fingers, and 141 seconds left on the clock, the fan noise loud enough to almost drown out the sound of his own pulse. "Ferryman, I'm pulling the schematic now." Overlook's voice had the rapid, flat cadence of someone typing while talking. "This matches a device signature from a case file out of Ankara 18 months ago. Same relay supplier, same tilt switch mechanism, same amateur soldering on the secondary trigger." Ankara. Jason's jaw tightened just slightly. That was supposed to be a dead network. Apparently not entirely. Whoever built this learned from watching you close down the last one. One floor up, the NYPD officer's radio crackled with his supervisor's voice, and something in his expression shifted as he listened. He looked back at Grace and Dave with new hesitation. "Command just told me to stand down and let the perimeter run itself," he said slowly. "Said there's a federal asset already inside handling it. No name given, just a designation." "What designation?" Grace asked, though some small, tired part of her already suspected the answer. "Ferryman," the officer said, frowning like the word tasted strange in his mouth. "Whoever that is." Grace closed her eyes for a second. 2 years of birthdays, inside jokes, a key to her apartment sitting on his keyring between an ordinary house key and an ordinary car key. And this whole time, there had been a designation. A file. A version of him with a case number instead of a last name. Below them, in the server closet, Jason set the case down gently on the floor, studied the wire bundle one more time, and reached for the black one first. 109 seconds, Overlook said. "Whenever you're ready." He didn't answer out loud. His hands were already moving. And up on the 25th floor, Grace realized she was holding her breath for a man whose real name she wasn't entirely sure she still knew. Jason's fingers hovered over the black wire, not touching it yet. "Overlook confirm. Tilt switch means I can't cut blind. If this thing shifts even a few degrees while I'm working, it's done." "Confirmed. Recommend stabilizing the case before you touch anything." He slid 2 fingers underneath the gray plastic housing, feeling for the angle of the sensor inside, moving with the kind of deliberate slowness that looked nothing like fear and everything like discipline. Sweat had started at his hairline despite the cold air blasting from the server vents, and somewhere behind him a fan clicked, spun up a notch, and settled again. 94 seconds. "Talk to me about the relay board," he said. "Cutting order." Red interrupts the timer circuit. Black interrupts the detonator circuit. But there's a third line I'm not reading clearly on this feed. Looks like a jumper wire solder between both bundles. A jumper. Jason exhaled slowly through his nose. That means cutting either one first triggers the other. Someone built this specifically to punish the standard playbook. That's my read too. 80 seconds. For the first time all night, something that might have been doubt flickered across Jason's face. Not panic. Nothing close to panic, just the small, private recalibration of a man realizing the easy version of this job wasn't the version he'd been given. Upstairs, Grace pressed her hand flat against the stairwell door, as if she could somehow feel through 6 floors of concrete whether he was still breathing. She didn't know his real name yet, or how many other rooms like this one he'd knelt in before tonight. She only knew that whatever happened in the next 80 seconds would decide which version of him she got to keep. "Forget the wires," Jason said suddenly. "Say again. If cutting either one triggers the other through the jumper, I don't cut. I kill power to the whole board before I touch anything." A pause on the line, brief and considering. "That works if you can isolate the battery source without shifting the tilt switch. Your margin for error just got smaller, not bigger." "Copy. Smaller margin, cleaner outcome." Jason's voice never rose above a murmur. The same register he used to ask a waiter for the check. He traced the wire bundle back with his eyes, found the small lithium battery pack zip-tied to the underside of the case, and reached for it with 2 fingers, moving like a man defusing something far more fragile than plastic and copper, which in a sense he was. The relay board's tiny status light blinked green, indifferent, unaware it was about to lose its heartbeat. 61 seconds. Grace, 1 floor up, had stopped pacing. She stood dead still by the stairwell door, palms still pressed flat against the cold metal, eyes closed, doing the only thing she could do from 6 floors away, counting her own heartbeat and hoping his matched it. Dave watched her instead of the hallway. "You really didn't know?" he said quietly. It wasn't really a question. "No," Grace said. "I really didn't." "For what it's worth," Dave added, 11 years in this building, and tonight's the first time I've ever actually been glad someone lied to me about their job. Whatever he really does, I hope he's good at it." 48 seconds. Below them, Jason's fingers closed around the battery pack, and he held perfectly still for 1 full second before he pulled. The kind of stillness that Grace would later realize was the exact opposite of everything she'd ever seen him do at the office. The battery pack came free with a soft click, and the LED timer went dark mid-digit, frozen at 39 seconds. 39 seconds that would have meant 6 floors without sprinklers and a fire with nothing left to stop it. For a moment, nobody said anything. Not Jason, not Overlook, not the fans still humming overhead like nothing had happened at all. Overlook, primary threat neutralized. Timer's dead. No detonation. Copy that. Ferryman. Good work. A pause. Don't relax yet. Loading dock signature is still moving. Second device possibility hasn't been ruled out. Jason sat back on his heels for exactly 1 breath. The first full breath he'd taken since the stairwell. Then stood, already moving toward the door. Upstairs, the officer's radio crackled again, and this time Grace watched his whole posture change, shoulders dropping half an inch, the way a man's does when a threat stops being theoretical. "Devices down," the officer said, half to himself, half to them. "Whoever's down there just saved this entire block." Grace didn't move. She was staring at the stairwell door like it might explain something to her if she just looked at it long enough. Dave finally broke the silence. "You okay, ma'am?" "I don't know," Grace said honestly. "I've been dating a stranger for 2 years, and I just found out he's very, very good at his job. And I don't yet know if that's supposed to make me feel better or worse." Below, Jason keyed his radio one more time, voice level, already moving toward the loading dock. "Ferryman en route to secondary target. ETA in 90 seconds. Grace listened to that call sign again and thought, absurdly, that she still didn't know what she was supposed to call him the next time she saw his face. The loading dock smelled like diesel exhaust and wet cardboard. Roll-up doors half open to the alley where a delivery truck sat abandoned mid-unload, its hazard lights still blinking uselessly against the brick. Jason moved along the wall in the dark, breathing controlled, senses tuned to a frequency most people didn't know they had. "Overlook, I'm at the dock. Talk to me." Signatures 20 feet ahead, behind the truck. "Not moving. Might know you're here." A voice called out from the shadows, tense, cracking at the edges. "Stop there. I have a detonator. I don't care what happens to me." Jason stopped exactly where he was told, hands loose at his sides, visible, non-threatening, weight balanced evenly on both feet the way he'd been trained to stand when a conversation could turn violent in half a second. "Okay," he said. "I'm stopped. Talk to me. Tell me what you actually want, because a bomb going off in an empty loading dock doesn't get anyone what they want." "You don't know what I want." "You're right. I don't. So tell me." Silence, except for the truck's engine ticking as it cooled, and somewhere above them a helicopter's rotor wash growing steadily louder. Sweeping searchlight beams starting to slice through the alley, throwing long moving shadows across the dumpsters and cracked asphalt. "They said this building. They said it mattered." The man said, voice cracking slightly, the detonator trembling visibly in his grip, even in the dim light. "Nobody said anyone would fight back." "Somebody always fights back," Jason said quietly. "That's the part nobody tells you when they hand you a detonator and a speech." Overlook's voice, low in his ear. "NYPD, yes, you. 2 minutes out. Your call, Ferryman." Jason didn't answer Overlook out loud. He kept his eyes on a man behind the truck, on the detonator shaking in his hand, on the specific tremor pattern that told Jason more than the man probably realized. Fear tremor, not commitment tremor. He learned the difference the hard way, years ago, somewhere he still didn't talk about. "You're not going to press that," Jason said, calm, almost kind. "I've watched a lot of hands hold a lot of triggers. Yours isn't ready. Some part of you already decided that before I walked in here. You don't know me." "No, but I know shaking hands. Steady hands press triggers. Yours have been shaking since I said hello. The man's eyes flicked toward the alley entrance, toward the helicopter light sweeping closer, toward every exit that had already quietly closed. Put it down, Jason said. Nobody else has to get hurt tonight. Not you either. For 3 long seconds, nothing moved. Then the detonator slipped from the man's fingers and clattered against the concrete, and he sank down against the truck's rear bumper like something inside him had simply run out of reasons to keep standing. Somewhere above, the helicopter's spotlight finally found them both, washing the alley in white. 2 ESU officers rounded the corner seconds later, weapons up, shouting commands. Jason stepped back, hands visible, and let them do their job. Ferryman, both threats neutralized, he said into his sleeve, voice finally letting a little exhaustion show through. Building's clear. Copy that, Overlook said. Command wants a full debrief. But first, go find your girlfriend. She's earned an explanation, and honestly, Ferryman, so have you. Grace heard him before she saw him. The stairwell door on the 25th floor, swinging open, footsteps that were unmistakably his and completely unfamiliar at the same time. He looked different in the fluorescent light. Not physically. Nothing about his face had changed. Same tired eyes, same crooked collar, same faint smell of server room dust clinging to his jacket. But she was looking at him now the way you look at an optical illusion. Once someone's shown you the second image hidden inside the first, she could still see the boring insurance guy, and now, impossibly, layered right on top of him, someone else entirely. Grace! His voice cracked just slightly on her name. She didn't run to him. She didn't step back either. She just stood there, arms crossed, studying his face like she was trying to memorize which parts of it had always been a performance. Was any of it real? She asked quietly. The pancakes, the dumb jokes, falling asleep during every movie we've ever watched. The key to my apartment. Was any single part of that real, or was I just cover? Jason crossed the distance between them slowly, like he was approaching something that might still go off. All of it, he said. Every single part of it was real. The job is the lie, Grace. You were never the lie. Behind him, Dave cleared his throat awkwardly and suddenly found something very interesting to look at on his radio. Grace exhaled a breath she felt like she'd been holding for 6 floors and 1 entire relationship. You have a lot of explaining to do. Yeah, Jason said, something almost like a real smile finally breaking through, the first honest one she'd seen from him all night. I really do, and I promise, none of it starts with I sell insurance. The lobby had turned into a staging ground. NYPD barricades, ambulances idling with their doors open just in case, evacuated employees wrapped in silver emergency blankets even though it wasn't cold outside. Cameras from 3 different news vans jostled for angle behind the police line, reporters practicing their opening lines under their breath. A man in a gray suit that fit too well to be off the rack pushed through the chaos toward Jason, flashing a credential at an officer who immediately stepped aside without argument. Ferryman. The man's voice was dry, almost amused. You couldn't have handled this quietly, could you? Frank. Jason didn't look surprised to see him. Good to know Langley still tracks my Tuesdays. Frank Mitchell glanced once at Grace, filing her away with the practiced neutrality of a man who'd spent 30 years reading rooms for a living, then back to Jason, his expression giving away exactly nothing. We need to talk. Somewhere that isn't in front of 6 news cameras. After, Jason said. I owe her a conversation first. You don't have after. Frank's voice dropped, all trace of dry humor gone. Overlook flagged something in the last 10 minutes. The device signature, the loading dock talker, all of it wasn't the operation. It was the distraction. Grace watched something pass across Jason's face she hadn't seen all night. Not fear exactly. Recognition. Distraction from what? Jason asked, already knowing he wasn't going to like the answer. Grand Central, Frank said. 6 minutes ago, security flagged an unattended case near the Vanderbilt Hall entrance. Rush hour crowds still packed in there, and NYPD's closest bomb tech is 14 minutes out. Grace felt her stomach drop. Grand Central. Rush hour. Thousands of people who had no idea their evening commute was about to become a headline, or worse, a memorial date. Go, she said, before Jason could even ask. He blinked at her. "Grace," I said, "go. You can explain everything to me later, over a very large glass of wine. But right now, there are people in that station who don't get to decide whether tonight is the night everything changes for them. Go. Now." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or the particular kind of relief that comes from being understood exactly when you need it most. "I'll come back," he said. "You'd better," Grace said. "You still owe me a real name for Ferryman's Ohio backstory." Frank Mitchell was already moving toward a black SUV idling at the curb. Door open, engine running. "Car's ready. ETA to 42nd Street with lights is 6 minutes if traffic cooperates." "Make it 5, Jason said, climbing in. The SUV pulled away from the curb hard enough that Frank had to grab the door handle. Weaving between 2 patrol cars and a fire truck still blocking half the avenue, sirens bouncing off glass towers on both sides of the street. Jason pulled up the live camera feed Overlook was already routing to his phone. A grainy overhead shot of Vanderbilt Hall, marble floor, gold clock, and a single black duffel bag sitting exactly where nobody had left a bag in 80 years of that station's history. "Talk to me, Overlook," Jason said. "What am I walking into?" 6 minutes until the next scheduled bag check sweep," Overlook replied. "You'll beat it by 4. That's your entire margin, Ferryman. Use it well." Vanderbilt Hall was chaos wrapped in gold leaf and marble. The astronomical ceiling glowing faintly overhead, oblivious, while below it commuters streamed past the black duffel bag without a second glance, exactly as its owner had planned. The smell of roasted chestnuts from a corner cart mixed with the metallic tang of the tracks below. Jason moved through the crowd at a jog that didn't look like a jog, badge already out for the 2 transit officers guarding the perimeter Overlook had quietly established 40 seconds earlier, commuters parting around him without ever quite registering why. "Clear a 30-foot radius," he told them. "Don't announce it. Panic kills more people than bombs do." He crouched beside the bag, unzipped it slow, and found a device far cruder than the one in the server closet. Exposed wiring, a cell phone taped to the top as a trigger. No elegant relay board this time, just enough explosive material packed around it to level a city bus. Someone in a hurry. Someone improvising. "Overlook, this one's remote detonated. Cell trigger, not timer." "Copy." That means whoever planted it is close enough to have visual or is watching a live feed. "Check your surroundings, Ferryman." Jason's eyes swept the hall without moving his head. Commuters, a coffee cart line, a busker packing up his guitar, a man near the information booth checking his watch 3 times in 10 seconds. There, mid-30s, gray jacket, hand in his coat pocket, eyes locked not on the bag but on Jason himself. "Overlook, I have eyes on what might be our trigger man. 200 feet away. Advise. Take him down quiet if you can. That phone goes off, this whole hall goes with it. You've got maybe 90 seconds before he notices you noticing him." Jason didn't run. Running would tell the man in the gray jacket everything he needed to know. Instead, Jason drifted through the crowd at an angle, weaving between a family of tourists photographing the ceiling and a woman rolling a suitcase, closing the distance one unhurried step at a time. 40 feet. The man's hand shifted in his pocket, thumb finding a button. 30 feet. Jason's pulse didn't spike. His training had spent years teaching his body to treat moments like this as simply another Tuesday, however untrue that had ever been, and however much it was about to stop being true the second he saw Grace again. 20 feet. The man's eyes finally locked onto him, recognition and panic arriving in the same half-second, and his hand yanked the phone free of his pocket, thumb already moving toward the screen. Jason closed the last of the distance in a single explosive stride, hand clamping over the man's wrist before the thumb landed, twisting the phone free and driving him sideways into a marble pillar hard enough to knock the air out of both of them. The cracked screen flashed once, a call attempt failing to connect, and then went dark. "Overlook, trigger secured. Device is safe. Repeat, device is safe." For 1 full second, Vanderbilt Hall kept moving exactly as it had a moment before. Commuters, coffee, a busker's guitar case, the low murmur of 1,000 ordinary conversations, completely unaware of how close the astronomical ceiling had just come to raining down on all of them. Then the transit officers moved in, cuffs out, radios crackling with confirmation calls, and Jason finally let himself exhale, one long breath that seemed to unwind something that had been coiled tight in his chest since the fire alarm first went off 31 floors above Midtown. Bomb squad arrived 4 minutes later to find the device already rendered safe, wires cut clean, cell phone bagged as evidence, and a federal agent sitting calmly on a marble bench nearby, like he was waiting for a train instead of having just prevented what could have been the worst night in the station's history. Frank Mitchell found him there, phone pressed to his ear, already fielding a call from someone several pay grades above either of them. Understood, Frank said into the phone, then lowered it and looked at Jason with something that almost passed for warmth. Director wants to know if Ferryman's available for a full write-up tomorrow. Tell the director Ferryman would like one night off first, Jason said. He's got a girlfriend who deserves an explanation and possibly an apology drink the size of the Hudson River. Frank almost smiled. Almost. You got 12 hours. Use them. By the time the SUV pulled back up outside the Midtown building, most of the news vans had cleared out, replaced by cleanup crews and a single police cruiser, keeping half the block cordoned off. Grace was still there, sitting on the curb with Dave, a paper cup of coffee gone cold in her hands, staring at nothing in particular. She stood the second she saw him climb out of the car. Neither of them said anything for a moment. Then Grace crossed the sidewalk, and instead of a question, she simply put both arms around him and held on, tight, like she was checking with her own hands that all the pieces were still attached. "You're an idiot," she said into his shoulder. "A very brave, very annoying idiot who is going to tell me absolutely everything, starting with your actual last name." "Reed's real," Jason said quietly. "That part was never fake. I promise you that." Dave Foster stood a few feet back, hands in his jacket pockets, watching the two of them with the particular awkwardness of a man who'd spent the last 2 hours reevaluating everything he thought he knew about the tenants in his building. His radio had gone quiet for the first time all night. "Hey," Dave said, when Jason finally looked over. "For what it's worth, sorry about earlier. The whole you sell insurance, go to the lobby thing." Jason actually laughed, the first real laugh Grace had heard from him all night. "You didn't know. Nobody's supposed to know. That's kind of the point. Still." Dave straightened up, something instinctive taking over. Not quite a salute, but close to it, a small dip of the head that meant more than words would have. "Whatever you actually do for a living, man. Building's lucky you were in it tonight. Building's lucky a lot of people were doing their jobs tonight," Jason said. "You kept people calm on that floor. That matters more than people think." Dave shrugged like the compliment didn't quite fit him yet, then wandered off to deal with a transit officer asking about the elevator logs, leaving Jason and Grace alone on a sidewalk that, 12 hours ago, had been the most ordinary block in Manhattan. Grace studied his face in the streetlight, the same face she'd looked at 1,000 mornings over coffee, tried to reconcile all of it at once. The scar, the limp that wasn't real, the calm that had never once, in 2 years, made sense until tonight. So she said, "Ferryman, is that a rank, a job title, or just something cool they let you pick when you signed up?" "Nobody picks their own call sign," Jason said, almost smiling. "That's rule number 1. Somebody else decides what you get to be called, and you just have to live with it." "So who names you then?" Grace asked. "Is there a committee? A hat you draw names from?" "Something like that," Jason said. "Mine came from my first handler. Said I always showed up exactly when someone needed to get across to the other side of something bad, and disappeared the second they were safe." "Ferryman, it stuck. That's actually kind of beautiful for a job that apparently involves crawling toward bombs." "Don't tell my mother that part. As far as she knows, I really do sell insurance. Has for 6 years. Grace let out a laugh that came out half-sob, the tension of the entire night finally breaking loose somewhere in her chest, her shoulders sagging like a coat finally set down after being carried too long. "Your mother doesn't know either?" "Nobody knows, Grace. That's the whole architecture of it. My cover has to survive contact with everyone who loves me, or it isn't a cover at all. That's the part they don't teach you how to feel okay about. And now I know. Now you know." Jason's voice softened. which either means I trust you more than I've trusted anyone in a decade, or it means I made a mistake tonight that's going to get flagged in a file somewhere by tomorrow morning. Which one is it? He looked at her for a long moment, streetlight catching the exhaustion under his eyes, the small cut on his knuckle he hadn't noticed until just now. The first one, he said. Definitely the first one. Grace reached out and laced her fingers through his, careful of the cut, the marble-cold sidewalk under her feet finally starting to feel like solid ground again. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere, Ferryman. Or Jason. Whichever one gets to come home tonight. 3 days later, the story had already faded from the news cycle the way these things always did. A brief segment about a swiftly contained security incident at a midtown office building. A passing mention of an unrelated item recovered at Grand Central. No names, no photographs, nothing that would ever trace back to a man named Jason Reed. Frank Mitchell had made sure of that personally. He was back at his desk by Thursday morning, tie slightly crooked, coffee exactly the way Grace liked hers, sitting untouched beside his keyboard because she'd started coming in a walk with him some mornings now, unable to quite let him out of her sight yet, though she'd never say that part out loud. Dave nodded to him in the lobby like nothing unusual had ever happened between them, which was, Jason understood, its own quiet form of respect. Some things didn't need to be spoken about twice. His supervisor in the actual insurance office, the real one, mundane and entirely unaware, asked him if he'd heard about the excitement downtown last week. Missed the whole thing, Jason said, sliding into his chair. Must have been something. Grace, sitting across the open floor plan at her own desk, caught his eye and had to bite back a laugh in her coffee cup. By all appearances, he was exactly what he'd always been. Quiet, punctual, forgettable in the specific, deliberate way that had kept him alive through more nights than the one he'd just had with her. But now at least one person in that building knew the truth, and that changed something in the shape of the silence he carried. Made it lighter, somehow, instead of heavier, the way a secret feels different once exactly one person is trusted to hold half of it with you. That Friday evening, Grace found a small manila envelope waiting on their kitchen counter, unmarked except for her first name, written in handwriting she now recognized as Jason's actual handwriting. Not the careful, forgettable version he used on office memos, but something looser, more human, the kind of handwriting a person only uses when nobody's grading it. Inside was a single photograph, slightly worn at the corners. Jason, younger, in a flight jacket that clearly wasn't insurance office attire, standing beside a nondescript gray aircraft on a runway, somewhere she didn't recognize, squinting into a sun she couldn't place on a map. On the back, in the same loose handwriting, first real assignment. 5 years before I ever ordered a coffee wrong on purpose, just to have an excuse to talk to you. She found him on the balcony a few minutes later, staring out at the skyline like it was just an ordinary Friday, which for the first time in 2 years, it almost was. You ordered your coffee wrong on purpose? She asked, holding up the photo. He turned, and for once, there was nothing guarded in his expression at all. Best decision I ever made in the field. Bought myself 30 extra seconds to work up the nerve to ask for your number. You could have just asked for my number like a normal person, Grace said, tucking the photo carefully back into its envelope. I am, historically, not very good at normal, Jason said. But I'm working on it. Grace leaned into him, the city lights spread out below them. And for the first time since the stairwell, the quiet between them felt like exactly what it was. Two people, finally, with nothing left to hide, standing on an ordinary balcony on an ordinary Friday that neither of them would ever quite think of as ordinary again. That night, on the balcony, Jason told Grace almost everything, as much as the job would ever let a person tell, anyway. About Ferryman, about Overlook, about a version of his life that had existed in the spaces between ordinary Tuesdays for longer than she'd known him at all. He never told her about that scar on his ribs. Some stories, he said, weren't his alone to give away. They belonged to people who hadn't gotten to walk away from them the way he had. She didn't push. She'd learned enough that week to understand that some silences aren't secrets kept out of unkindness. They're just the last, quiet cost of a job most people will never have to understand. The next morning, he made her coffee exactly the way she liked it, No reminder needed. Same as he had every single morning for 2 years. Some things, it turned out, really had been real all along. He still works in that same building. Still wears the same forgettable tie. Still lets Dave believe, mostly, that Thursday was just an unusually eventful fire drill, and Dave, to his credit, never asks twice. But every so often late at night, an earpiece buzzes and a man named Jason Reed quietly disappears for a few hours and comes home just in time for coffee, carrying, as always, exactly nothing that would ever give him away. If this story hit home for you, do me a favor and hit that like button. Drop a comment and tell me, would you have followed him into that stairwell or stayed put like everyone told you to? And if you want more stories like this one, hit subscribe because there are a lot more hidden heroes where this one came from, wearing ordinary faces, waiting for their own Thursday night. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.